Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at North Norfolk District Council on Wednesday, the 15th of March. And the first item on our agenda today is to receive apologies for absence.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Emma Spagnola. I should also note that at very short notice yesterday afternoon, the PCC unfortunately gave us his apologies and is not able to attend today. I did ask if there was anyone able that was free to attend in his place. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So as far as I can see, we will not have anyone to present a crime and disorder update today, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is substitutes. I believe we have Councillor Tory, is that right?
Yes, but I believe he has been appointed but not confirmed by council, so we will count him as a substitute for today.
I'm here either way, Mr. Chairman, whichever way it's needed to be recorded.
I was going to say, in whatever capacity you are here today, welcome. Right, item 3, public questions and statements.
None received.
Thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of our last meeting. So that's the meeting held on the 15th of February. And we'll go through them first page by page for accuracy. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Does anybody have any observations in regard to the accuracy of those minutes, and are you content to accept those as a record of that meeting? Okay, thank you. I just think it is probably opportune just to follow up on a couple of matters in relation to those minutes. And I notice we don't have the leader or the portfolio holder for environment here, but I'm mindful that we had a lengthy briefing from Sergio last time, and I believe we've got events which have overtaken some of those issues, and I wonder whether Mr. Hems, you would wish to speak today just to update us on where we are in relation to the strike action.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Yes, industrial action is currently being undertaken by members of the Unison union in relation to a pay dispute with Serco. That is affecting both the North Norfolk collections and also those associated with Breckland. The position as of this morning, and I have been updating members each evening with a general update. So the position at the moment is that all but one rounds are deployed today. One of the smaller rounds has not gone out, but it's doing recycling. Otherwise, across all days, all rounds have been deployed. We have had a number of rounds that haven't completed, but actually in the grand scheme of things, that is a relatively small number of rounds. Most of those that haven't completed have been substantially complete. The crews are going back out for and collecting missed collections from the previous day at the start of the day for residual collections for garden waste, any missed garden waste or any missed trade of all type, commercial collections of all types. What we have agreed with Serco is that missed recycling collections will not be returned to, and we'll ask those residents to save that recycling and put it out as additional weight, or as put it in their bin as normal in a fortnight's time as part of the normal scheduled collection. And if they have more waste than will fit in their bin at that time, then they can put it out at the side of their bin in a clear, transparent bag or in a cardboard box. And basically crews will take that as side waste in as part of the normal schedule collection. So yes, there is some disruption to services, but it is minimal. So I'm happy to take any questions that people have.
Thank you. So in the main, vehicles are going out with a driver and one loader rather than the normal two. Is that correct?
So it's a bit of a mix depending on resources. So there are on Monday there were a number of rounds went out driver +2 because of some resourcing issues. There was yesterday was more driver +1, whereas normally they'd send a driver +2 loaders. But actually those crews are working really effectively and covering each other, and so it's not having a significant impact on collections in the main. So I'm really pleased with the service that we're currently seeing in terms of in the context of that industrial action.
So you mentioned like in the case of the recycling a collection in the next 2 weeks. So how long do you expect the strike action to last?
So the industrial action is currently scheduled between the 13th and the 19th. So there will be no further action beyond that or extended beyond that, as far as I'm concerned, aware. There is an opportunity for Unison to call further strike action because their ballot mandate gives them the potential to call further strikes for a period of time. But they haven't yet provided any notice, as far as I'm aware, to Serco of that. And they have to give, my understanding is 2 weeks notice of that. So there would be a period of time before they could hold further industrial action or all out action in terms of actual strike.
Okay, so the likelihood is then that those like the recycling that will be subject to a larger collection in a 2 weeks' time will happen.
I don't see any reason why they would not be collected as anticipated. And in fact, Serco are continuing to recruit and induct further capacity into their current provision. So we're expecting more resource to be deployed on the contract towards the end of the week in any case. So I think by then they would have a cohort of individuals who where we would see better provision anyway. The issue with a waste collection is not so much in terms of recycling, it's not so much volume in the same way as it is with residual, because it tends to be the issue is about a mixture of volume but weight. Residual is quite heavy, recycling tends to be quite light. And so in the grand scheme of things, the issue is about having to go through the cycle of putting a bin up onto the back of the lift. So actually putting a bag into the back alongside a bin isn't going to take that much longer. That's there will be a slight impact in terms of the number of collections they can complete in a day, but it shouldn't be that significant.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, the collection in Fakenham yesterday morning was perfect, and they were there at 7 o'clock this morning as well. So from Fakenham's point of view, there really hasn't been any disturbance. Interesting that if 2 can do it, why do they need 3?
It is a question I have asked the Serco management, not in, but they do need 2 loaders. I think the issue is that these guys are, they are determined they're going to do as best job as they possibly can, and so they are working. They're working very hard. I think it is a monumental effort on their part. So in terms of that, I think under normal circumstances, you would look at a driver +2 as a resource to be able to deliver.
Okay. Councillor Battercombe.
I just think maybe we should pass our thanks to those that are working to deliver this service during this time, because it can't be easy for them. And I think they're doing their very best to try and keep the bins being emptied. So
I will pass that thanks on if you're happy for that to be done, Chair.
I think you can take it as read that members of this committee would certainly wish to express our appreciation, please, for the level of service that's being delivered. And it's good to hear that it's as thorough as it is, and that we've got plans in place to catch up where it isn't quite up to date at the moment. So thank you for that. Any others? Councillor Housing. Can you put your mic on, please?
Sorry, have we finished on Serco? Can I raise another question?
We have, if nobody else wants to raise anything further.
Okay. Apologies, I couldn't make the last two meetings because I had funerals to attend. Can I just go to page 7 of the minutes? And I'm also a little bit working on the fly this morning because my iPad won't load agendas.
Page 7.
Yeah, it loads the front page, but it doesn't load the bulk of the agenda. So I've had to sort of skim this as we're going through it. On page 7, there are actions relating to the £400,000. Are they actions as a report to GRAC, or are they actions to report to this committee?
You're referring, I think, to action 1.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Officers to provide a detailed breakdown of costs included in the 400,000 additional funding request once tenders were confirmed, or if delayed, then estimates provided in advance of the March meeting.
And is it the March ONS meeting?
It is.
So why aren't those figures in the pack?
Well, I don't know. I think Matt might be able to help us in regard to progressing that matter.
Yeah, so just to advise the committee, the request was obviously made for that information. I believe one of the tenders has been delayed because there is now a planned change to work at one of the lokes, and they're still not entirely sure of the final marketplace costs. So essentially they've said they still can't confirm those costs at the current time, but as soon as they are, then they will give us that information.
But they refer to estimates here, not tenders. Estimates are different from tenders. Why don't we have the estimate information? And just to make the point, I raised this back in October when we're 6 months on, and I don't think it's good enough that this is still arising in minutes to a meeting which I accept I couldn't attend, but into this March meeting.
Does any officer wish to make a comment on this? Mr. Flatch, would you like to respond?
I don't know the detail of the question that Councillor Housden has asked. This has been managed through the Director of Place and Climate Change. There was a report to Cabinet Working Party yesterday where an update was provided, and I thought that it was explained that the works to Black Swan Loke had commenced, but there was going to be further public consultation, so a scheme could be delivered within the budget that was available. So I will need to take the request away. I don't have that information to hand at the present time.
Okay, thank you.
You raise a very good point, and I think it is a matter of some concern to the committee that the situation has run for as long as it has, and that various requests have been made along the way, and we have arrived at this situation where we don't have the information that's been requested. So I agree. Councillor Batikova.
Thank you. I mean, clearly I'm not a member of Cabinet anymore, but it was my understanding from listening to the discussions last time, and perhaps I'm wrong, and tapes would say, that the reason this information couldn't be delivered was because we are waiting for those tenders, and to put out tenders or estimates into the public domain when we're waiting for them is obviously commercially sensitive information and might then contravene what we're waiting for the price on. Now, if I was a member of the opposition, I might say they could have been provided in purple papers as estimates. So I'm just saying that was my understanding from the last meeting.
Yes, you're right. That was part of the discussion, but that that discussion that also included exploration of could those estimates be provided under purple papers, because this committee does receive information, and that was where the matter was left. Now, Mr. Black, would you like to add to that?
So I think the reports that went to Governance, Risk and Audit Committee on the 7th of March of the extent to which the project had complied with the council's project governance framework was sound. This is a complex project. It was explained that funding had been secured initially from Historic England for a town centre enhancement scheme, which was multifaceted and comprised 4 principal elements: the marketplace, a building improvement grant scheme, works to the Cedars building, and a programme of community workshops and engagement. The most complex scheme was the marketplace enhancements, because that was done in conjunction with the county council as the highway authority and required consultation and engagement and adoption of traffic regulation orders. The works have been delivered on that element of the scheme in accordance with the programme between September of last year and the end of this month, and the works are on track. The nature of the scheme has had to be dynamic and flexed according to some sort of situations on the ground. There was a sinkhole in the marketplace, which was not known and was not attributed to the work, so that caused some slight delay, and there is some adjustment in the project costs because there was a claim being made through the county council for disturbance as a result of those Anglian waterworks. The £400,000 was requested to do works in Black Swan Loke, Bank Loke, and the approach to the church, which are just beyond the marketplace itself, and were subject of further price requests, largely in respect of labour, in that the authority did purchase the necessary stone and material upfront in Q1 of 2022 with Historic England's support. So we sought to protect the contract value by buying those materials at an early juncture to ensure consistent quality and consistency of the availability of that material in one go. And so the materials required to do those extra parts of the town are still available, but obviously a project that's been delivered over a 2-year period has seen significant construction cost inflation, as has been seen across such projects across the country as a whole. But I don't know the exact position as of today in terms of the estimates that Councillor Housden has requested, and I will seek to provide that information through officers that are delivering that project in the coming days.
Thank you for that. And I think that's a position that was reached at the end of that item last meeting, when we had Officer Quick in particular, who was giving the more detailed information on that. So efforts were made to secure that information for today, and you will know they're not here.
No, and I thought the information that sort of from the BRAC was for benches, signage, planters, lighting, and works to Black Swan Loke. I thought that was what we were seeking information about.
Well, that's a good question, because I don't think we've had sufficient really to be able to narrow that down with any certainty where that where the information paucity was. But there we go.
Chairman, Mrs. Stankley said that at page 48 of your agenda of the February meeting, on pages 47 and 48, there was a breakdown of the costs for the HAS placemaking budgets in the town centre. I don't know whether that would have addressed Councillor Housden's inquiry, but that does include details of the cost elements, the materials, the labour, and the additional request for money that is outstanding. So that information was provided to your February meeting. I wasn't personally present at that meeting myself either.
No, it was, you're right, it was provided at that meeting, but it was, of course, the comments with regard to the provision of the further information was made on the basis that that did not cover the concerns of the committee at that time. So thank you for pointing that out. And I know that you weren't at that meeting, Councillor Howes, and so you wouldn't have been privy to that level of detail. But do you want to comment any further on what you've seen?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, it's 6 months on, and this is presumably the last overview and scrutiny meeting. It's the last opportunity we'll get to look at this, presumably. Is that correct?
Yes, there are no further scheduled meetings.
Well, then can we have these circulated details? Can they be circulated?
I think, Mr. Blatch, is that what you were referring to?
I don't have those here
No,
today,
I
and
understand
I
that,
wasn't at
yeah.
the February meeting myself. It's something I'll take away and get from the project officers.
Fine. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Just to continue that, I'm mindful that a number of recommendations have been made to GRAC, and that was one of them. Councillor Rest, as chair of GRAC, are you able to perhaps update us in outline on what GRAC decided, decisions or points that were confirmed last week at your GRAC meeting?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The GRAC meeting, the brief that was given to GRAC had come through from ONS, was to review the governance and consider the project's risk register. And firstly, in the GRAC agenda of that day, references made on page 60, 5.6, with an explanation of the request for 400k. That's what we've just been discussing. We had no more information than what is in there. No, there is no breakdown. We hadn't seen it. It was a request, but the wording tends to be, well, they wanted 400,000, let's ask for it, and we got it. But it hasn't been sort of broken down. With regard to the risk log, which is what you mentioned, the original question was why 30% of the log was in red, which is stated as initial risk. After some conversations, and I accept what the CEO said, that when observed as residual risk, it reduced by half. And it was agreed that this was, we felt, misleading, that there is two columns. One is the initial, one is the residual, because what you look at is colour. And when you see lots of red, straight away you think there's obviously a problem. But I think in response, what was said was that probably we don't need the residual risk to be listed again. We just need to know what the final outcome is. So, and in response to lessons learnt, which we spoke to the officer about, which unfortunately tends to be the standard argument these days. Everybody says we will learn from our lessons. It was agreed that all future projects must take into consideration what is on that register and look at any mistakes that were made. So I can't add much more to your conversation now. There's a couple of other members that were here, were at the GRAC meeting. They may have a slight better memory. It was only a week ago. We haven't obviously got the minutes. They will come out and they will produce that. But in general terms, we did look through it for you. And that is the conclusions that we came up with.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Toy, I know you, and then Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just been mentioned twice by officers that it's a dynamic project. It has been changing, and we've seen that and we've heard that in meetings. So to go with that further detail that we've still asked for and expect to be distributed, it'd be interesting to see what they've had to review since the last meeting or what those changes were, because I think Matt said about they're having to reconsult on certain things. So it would just be interesting to add that to it. So we've got the context of why maybe we didn't get it, why those figures weren't clear. If there's something, for example, we heard about the hole, if you were starting to do something, there's a hole and it delays the project and then you knock on. So what's happened since we asked for more detail in February? It hasn't come because of reasons of change. I think we need to know what that change is. Does that make sense? I don't know if I got there. Apologies if I didn't.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think at the heart of this issue is that at the December cabinet meeting, an application was made for 400,000. And one would expect that application to be supported by sufficient detail so that cabinet was fully aware of what exactly made that figure 400,000. You could add to that, from our point of view, we would also want to know what had happened as a contingency, because you don't ask for extra money until you know what's happened to your contingency. So we've had some discussion about that along the way. So for me, it's not about what's happened subsequently, it's what happened back in November, December, when that application was brought to cabinet. And it's just really a matter of making sure that we, as an overview and scrutiny committee, are aware of what that supporting information was. At one end of the scale, if there was no supporting information, I think we might have a view about whether the decision at cabinet was one that we would want to look more closely at. And at the other end of the spectrum, if all the information was there, then, well, that's absolutely fine. So we can put that matter to bed. And what we haven't been able to do over the ensuing 5 or 6 months is to put that matter to bed in a comfortable way. So, and it's not been through lack of asking for the information. That's been done several times over, including at our last meeting. So,
okay, so
I take your point about ongoing and that,
yeah.
Yes, it is, but that's kind of after the fact. Really.
Okay, so just to be clear, then what we're asking for is the numbers behind the 400 in December.
Absolutely, absolutely right. What's happened subsequently may be the subject of further questions at some stage or other. I don't know. Okay, that'll be for the future.
Councillor Hyde, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just for information, really. As of yesterday, the works in the marketplace were virtually complete. The final tarmac at the Church Road Marketplace Junction was going down, and it's expected that will be reopened at the end of the week or beginning of next week. The market back in the marketplace on Thursday week, which has been great. As far as the Lokes are concerned, I'm aware there are discussions going on with the town council who may well be funding some of that work. And these original schemes are being considerably reduced to meet the available funding. There's no grandiose works going on there. For example, the town council will be paying for new lighting in Bankloke. So there is involvement with the minor authority to share some of those costs on those folks. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, I was an observer at the Cabinet Working Party, the Project Working Party meeting yesterday, so I'm kind of privy to that information that was raised there, but in a way that's kind of after the fact. And I don't think this committee has challenged, if you like, either the objectives or the outcomes so far. That may be a subject of a separate piece of work in the future. This is really quite a specific matter around the additional 400,000, but thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Cushing.
Yes, Mr. I just want to add a little bit, if we may. If we go back to last October, this request for £400,000 came out of the blue. There was no prior warning that there were risks around the budget. So that's what surprised us at the time. And obviously, when the request came through, we challenged, I believe, hard. You and I certainly challenged hard in the cabinet, as we didn't understand the breakdown of that 400,000. We had a full council where we made the same points, but it was all waved through by the administration. And here we are 6 months later, and we still don't know. Now, that's an appalling state of affairs, and it's not really surprising that the delivery of this project has raised a lot of concerns about the confidence of the project management of the whole thing. So I just made that, but given we're now in our last meeting, unless we can get some reports, as the Councillor Housen's asked, we'll have to wait till sort of after the May elections to probably shed some light on it then.
Thank you. Yes, I think just on a point of accuracy, the first time I was aware of the 400,000 was I think at the December meeting of Cabinet. So, and that's when the process kind of really kicked in. So I made it very clear at that Cabinet meeting that we would be looking at, for overview and scrutiny purposes, we would be looking for a detailed breakdown of that. But the fact of the matter is, it's been running for some months, several months, and there have been several stages to that request process. And the point I think that a more general point that has to be made, this committee can only deliver on its role if it's provided with adequate information to be able to reach assurances with regard to what the council is doing. And it does seem, I have to say, that that has not been that's not a process, that there's been a breakdown in process there that has not enabled this committee to be able to conduct that piece of business in a timely and in a sufficient depth way that we would be able to give an assurance that we are satisfying that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't wish to labour the point, but Councillor Cushing's just picked up in October, November, and we did actually ask, I think, about the cost of a scaled back scheme. And now we're now hearing the scheme's been scaled back. So in addition to being scaled back, we've had to put in another 400,000. So I think going back to October and November, it would have been far more prudent to have had a detailed breakdown. So we could have assessed it in its true light, forgetting the fact that every project's dynamic, but at least at a snapshot in time, we would have known exactly where we were. But I don't want to labour it anymore.
I think also at that time we were concerned regarding the contingency element as to how where that was and how that been spent and so on and so forth. But I think we've probably said enough today. I think the point is made loud and clear. Mr. Blatch, you will take that point away with regard to the supply of a breakdown of the 400,000.
That's correct, but just to correct, I think a statement that Councillor Housen made, I don't think this project itself has in any way been scaled back. The programme has been delivered in the marketplace, Market Street and the Shambles area. It was always identified that the lokes, particularly from Bank Loke and Black Swan Loke, were critical in terms of safe, well-lit public thoroughfares to provide access to a marketplace, particularly where on-street parking was going to be removed from that space, and the scheme still seeks to address and provide and meet those needs. So I don't think the physical geography of the area to be covered has been scaled back. It is around the nature of the improvements that are done to those spaces to hopefully stay within budget, even though with the additional 400,000. And I think the costs largely relate to labour and contract supervision rather than the purchase of the materials, which were purchased some months ago.
Yeah, okay. Well, I appreciate that, but Councillor Toy just said it's been scaled back. So what did you say? Somebody made a statement earlier on, scaled back was the phrase.
I can certainly say that the term scale back has been one that's been used by offices when they have presented in the past. But I think the context of that is that the elements of the total project were subject to rescoping, and I don't think there's probably much more that we need to kind of pursue in that direction. Let's keep our focus on justification of the 400,000. Okay, right. Are we all done on that? Thank you. Right. We can move on then to item 5, which is declarations of interest. Did anybody have any declarations in relation to today's business? No. Okay, thank you. Item 6, items of urgent business.
None received.
Thank you. Item 7, petitions from the members of the public.
And none received.
Thank you. Item 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
And item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee's reports or recommendations.
I don't think there's anything significant to report. Just to note, obviously, that the budget was approved in line with the committee's recommendations since the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Item 10 is the crime and disorder update, Police and Crime Commissioner's briefing. Well, we've heard earlier that the Police and Crime Commissioner is not able to attend it today and has sent apologies. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody to present on that, and I think that is disappointing, but what we do have is the written report which we can discuss. So
just to note, Chairman, that is the essentially the same plan that he's presented at previous meetings. We just asked for an update on the implementation of that plan, but it's not something that the committee hasn't seen before.
Yeah. So comments on the paper? Questions?
I would say if there are any particular questions that the committee would have liked to have put to the PCC, I'd be happy to pass those on as written questions via email, and we can get a written response on those.
Yes. Okay, I've got Councillor Fredericks and then Councillor Buttercofer.
Thank you so much, Chair, and good morning, members and officers. Yes, I'm actually quite disappointed as well that we haven't got the update on the achievements, and also in particular with the domestic abuse and crimes against women and girls. I would like to know where that's improved and has it improved. So I'll be writing to the OPCC and hoping that he'll come into the office and explain that. That'd be lovely. But yeah, this is just the forward plan, but I'd really like to see the improvements made. Thank you.
Well, that's one, if the committee is agreeable to that, that's one of the specific questions that we can put as a committee to the Police and Crime Commissioner. Councillor Buttercofer.
All I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, is obviously I'm a representative for this council on the panel, the Police and Crime Panel for Norfolk. So I'm happy to take back any questions this committee has. I will try and answer any questions, but I do think it is particularly disappointing that the Police and Crime Commissioner hasn't fielded at least a deputy for this meeting this morning, particularly when he made a point at the last Police and Crime Panel meeting that members hadn't bothered to turn up. So it's, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I think, you have to make sure you practice what you preach.
I can't argue with that. So I think we will, I think, want to express our disappointment with regard to nobody here to present that paper. I do understand that there are operational situations that arise that prevent an individual from attending, but generally speaking, there is flexibility in structures to send at least a representative who can talk with some familiarity on the paper. And the other thing is, this is a regulatory item that we have on our calendar of schedule of business. And so we would expect there to be, and this is the first time nobody has turned up. We've even had 2 officers turned up, and that's been absolutely fine. That has not prevented us from carrying out what we need to do. So, okay. Any further? Oh, so I think I saw your hand. Did I? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I would, if someone had been here, I would have liked to have asked that, given the up and coming online bill that's coming through, how they were intending to reflect that, because there's very little in this plan, and we did comment on this last time in terms of looking at harassment and abuse through cyber. There's organised crime and cyber crime, but not down on a more personal level. So I think I would have liked to have known what they're doing in terms of that. Arguments at the time for the removal of the PCSOs, one of the arguments was that they needed to have more emphasis to be on online crime, particularly harassment, etc. And I'd like to know whether that's actually come forward and how they intend to be able to do what's going to come forward in the online.
Okay. I'm sure that's an argument that will run and run. But we did have a discussion along those lines. You're right, and I think we can seek an update on those. Any other points that anybody wants to? Councillor Toy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to further, I don't know if you remember when he came to us before, I asked about safety for cyclists and people walking on country roads, and he said, oh, we were going to do more speed cameras. Didn't really answer it, and I wanted to see if there's a follow-up, and there's nothing mentioned in the plan specifically. So that's something that I would have been asking about this morning. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm sure we can put a question along those lines.
Thank you.
Councillor Housden.
Yes, the strategic policing requirement, the final paragraph is that they're revising that requirement. And I wondered perhaps when somebody is present, we might just have an idea of what the revisions are on that plan. It's on top of page 26, the strategic policing requirement. The bullet points of terrorism, well, I don't need to read them, but it's what the review of those bullet points is. And we've talked about harassment, we've talked about harassment, cyber harassment and actual harassment, but you know, this probably will be moving around, seeing as it was created in 2015, and we're not 10 years on, but we're not far off, and it would be good just to see what their priorities might be in that strategic requirement.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions I'd be interested to know, had the PCC been here, is around the recruitment, because I seem to recall last time when he came, he mentioned that there were a number of veterans retiring and they're being replaced by a lot of obviously more inexperienced officers, which is in terms of the overall mix meant there was obviously quite a degradation in terms of experience in the police force. So I'd like to understand the current position on that. The other thing I'd be interested to know is the future of the safer neighbourhood action panels. Because I know when I attended the last Fakenham one, there was talk about it might actually, I think it's changing its name to something other than SNAP, but they're all reviewing the future of those. So I'd be interested to know what his thoughts are on that.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Mr. Hemmings.
Sorry, I may be able to help a little with that. There is a consultation being run by the police at the moment on the safer neighbourhood action panels. I'm attending that event. I think it's the 24th of March, which is a part of their consultation process.
Okay. Right, thank you. Councillor Buttercup.
I think that's a very good point, because very often I've made the point to the panel when we've been there that police don't attend parish council meetings like they used to, even on a irregular basis. You know, you never see them anymore there. And I'm always told, oh, but if you go to the SNAP meeting, you can get told, well, if they're taking that away as well, you know, so I think that is a big point of concern. But as Officer Hems said, that's something that is going out to consultation, but a lot of people need to be aware of that and follow up on it.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to know more about the savings to be identified, because there's quite chunky numbers here.
Sorry.
I'd like to know more about the savings to be identified in the budget, because the savings that they have identified is not inconsiderable. The savings to be identified in 24-25 is quite a lot of money, and I'd like to have some assurance that they actually know where they're going to find these savings and they're not going to compromise service at all. Thank you very much.
Councillor Buttercup.
Again, I asked the PCC about this when we had the budget meeting, because it's a big concern to all of us. And he actually admitted that if he hadn't received extra money at the last minute from government, they would have had to have made cuts this year to the policing services. So I think I would share your concern on that, because they're basically hoping that money will come from central government. And that worries me a lot for the future of our policing.
Okay, any more? I have one, and that is, I think, just turning to page 23 and the 6 pillars that form the basis of the police and crime plan. the visible and trusted policing one, which is quite topical at the moment, in the sense that my understanding is that all police forces are going through a re-vetting process. So I would like to know where the Norfolk Constabulary is in the process of re-vetting their offices, because I think that is a very public-facing piece of work that was intended to ensure that, and I don't like using the term rotten apples, but we have a couple of examples of what one would term rotten apples in the barrel, and to identify any that might fall into that category that have yet to be, if you like, identified. So I think I'd like to know where they are in terms of revetting the officer core of the force. Councillor Buttercover.
Sorry, I attended a meeting only yesterday morning where this was discussed. So this was the sub panel of the police and crime panel, and vetting. They have collected all of the data now on all of the officers, and they are waiting for a report back in around about the next 10 days of whether that has shown any problems with the vetting. One of the things that was raised yesterday was that the vetting of police officers isn't ongoing. So we were talking about, and Councillor Toy might be able to throw light on this, how armed forces personnel have different vetting updates during their service life, whereas police officers don't at the moment. And we said that we thought, because of the amount of contact they have with the general public, it's a lot more important that actually police officers are constantly vetted to make sure there have been no red flags pop up, that should be investigated further to make sure that they're doing their jobs correctly.
Yes, okay. Thank you for that.
But so hopefully in the next couple of weeks, the OPC will have the first information.
Yes, I don't know how the police work. I do know how the armed forces work, and the armed forces do indeed have re-vetting processes, but that's always in relation to when you move jobs. If you're moving to a different security classification, then you will be re-vetted according to the needs of that role that you are being moving to. But I'm not aware of any other what I would call routine re-vetting processes. But I do think that when I think about the number of, and I'm not saying that the DBS scheme, I think they call it something else now, but for all of us that engage in activities where DBSs are required, that is done on a routine basis. And I think they only last for 5 years or something like that, and they have to be redone. Councillor Withington. 3 years, is it? Okay. There is a process that kind of, I think there are some parallels that ought to be looked at. But in any event, my first concern was that initial trawl to make sure that, as of today, so to speak, that we are comfortable with the vetting processes for the current members of the force. And just picking up on the point that was been made already with regard to public engagement and how the police goes about that public engagement, I think that town and parish councils are an important part of that. And I have made the point to the Police and Crime Commissioner that I view that as a very effective way in which the police can engage with communities, because town and parish councils, whether they are elected or whether they are co-opted, they are representatives of the community, and there are various strands there which they can connect with to form what I would call a more resilient confidence base about what the police are doing, what the communities are most concerned about, and so on and so forth. And certainly the response I got from the Police and Crime Commissioner was not a reassuring one, in the sense that he did not attach the same level of value that I have seen over the several years that I've seen police beat managers attending, or if not attending, then sending reports to town and parish council meetings. I don't think there is an expectation that they should attend every meeting by any manner or means. But I think for there to be a standing item on the agendas, most of them, certainly the parish councils, town and parish councils that I attend, there is a standing item for a police report, and that's either given orally or it's given in writing. And not all the meetings have those reports, but I think there are some important links and there's a lot of value there. The commissioner did say to me that actually his instruction to the chief constable was that that wasn't, in his view, one of the priorities, and so therefore you could understand it if the chief constable had cascaded that down to the beat level. That is one of the reasons why you may not see as many constables turning up at town and parish council meetings. I do think that may be due to the Police and Crime Commissioner not having perhaps engaged with town and parish council meetings to understand that there is no expectation for the beat manager to be there for the whole of the meeting. Most of the meetings that I witness, that they are given an early slot in the agenda. It's up to them whether they want to stay for the rest of the meeting, but there's no expectation that they do. And I think the figure that the commissioner quoted to me was something I don't wish to see my offices tied up for 2 hours. I would have pointed out to him today that in my experience, it's not a 2-hour commitment. It is a much lesser time than that. And in any event, this is about beat managers being able to use their discretion about how they might apportion time for that. So I think there is some pressing of points to be done there about how the police could do, I think, better and have done better, I have to say, up until recently, because I've seen police attending meetings on a fairly regular basis, and I've seen the value of that. And they've actually said to me, they see the value of that, not just with the town and parish councils, but at both district and county level. They appreciate having those opportunities for off-the-record discussions in a lot of cases. Councillor Buttercofer.
Only to say I brought up this very point and was told that basically they don't have the money for Dixon of Dock Green policing.
I think that's an interesting point, because in no way do I see that in the context of the Dixon of Dock Green model whatsoever. We've left that long behind. It may be something that's a useful kind of expression to use, but I don't think it has any relevance to what I see as a more modern, much more modern way of policing. Councillor Fredericks.
I just want to add an aside to that. I want to praise Alex Barnes and also Joey Mazzetti, who have taken the initiative to go into supermarkets and have stalls there and are a bit more visible. But I think that's at a very, 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 very local level. But I agree with everything that's been said. So we need more engagement.
Yes, I mean, I know that some snap meetings being one, and I know that, I don't know what they call them, whether they call them surgeries or whether they call them other engagement opportunities, but but of course it's a very ad hoc, and the point I make about town and parish council meetings is that not only do you get the councillors there, but you also get members of the public. Okay, very variable number, I know, but it's an opportunity, and therefore it's an opportunity for members of the public. If they know that there is a police and crime slot there, they can go and can make that point at those meetings. Right, okay. Any other points in relation to the report that's been submitted? No? Okay. I think you might have a number of questions there. Do you want to just quickly trot through them?
Yeah, I've got 5 questions. So the first one relates to the issues of domestic violence and whether they've been improved. Can we see evidence of this? The second is in regards to the online policing bill. how would the OPCCN reflect these changes, given that the argument to remove PCSOs was to place more emphasis on online crime? The third was, have there been any revisions of the strategic policing crime plan, again with regards to domestic abuse and cybercrime and the increase in these crimes? The fourth was what savings have been identified within the policing budget. And then the fifth, with regards to visible and trusted policing, have any changes been made to the vetting process, and what is the outcome of the review of that?
Councillor Toy.
Yeah, whether there was going to be, because he admitted last time he was here that every day he gets emails from cyclists and that in country lanes, yet there's nothing about rural road policing.
Sorry, yeah, I have got that one.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
Okay, you picked that up. Right, Councillor Whittington.
Sorry, I know we've got a long meeting. On terms of the domestic abuse one, do you think we could add something in, please, about looking whether those improvements are consistent across low risk and medium and high risk cases? Because I think there are some issues around where the police are actually getting involved in and how that's been dealt with through NIDAS.
Yep, added that.
Okay, right. So if we've gone through the questions, I think we should note the report. I don't think we have we note the report and agree the questions to be addressed to the Police and Crime Commissioner. That's as far as we can go, I think. Can I have a proposal and a seconder for those? Councillor Patikova, Councillor Toy. Can I have a show of hands, please, in support of that? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 11 then is the budget monitoring period 10, 22 to 23. We don't have the cabinet member here. We have the leader here. Do you wish to speak on that?
Yeah, I can speak. So, yes, obviously in Eric's absence, apologies that I was a bit late into the meeting. I had an early urgent meeting. I mean, obviously you can clearly see the inflationary pressures that have resulted in a forecast overspend, fuel and energy costs, of course, impacting on every operational service, including, of course, waste collection, for which there is little mitigation. Energy costs have been mitigated. You're aware, of course, about the rollout of LED lighting. Some costs will be recouped from service charges and rent, so not the final position on that. And our net zero board is visiting the council property portfolio to find ways of improving efficiency. Everyone is aware, of course, of the inflation in staffing costs, mitigated, of course, to a certain extent by the vacant posts you can see detailed under many of the service areas throughout the paper. There were growing levels of homelessness offset by some additional funding for this area. Build and maintenance costs are, of course, very challenging to deal with. There has been some mitigation here where longer lead items were purchased far ahead of use when prices were favourable, when we could see the direction of the market. And this, of course, also relates to your earlier conversation about HAS. Vandalism has actually contributed to quite a sizable chunk of the overspend. As you can see, there's almost £30,000 there, mostly in Holt, Sheringham, Cromer. So that's deeply disappointing, and obviously a cost that the council has to meet up front. But there has been some positives in that we've been able to realise some additional incomes from assets above and beyond expectations, particularly those connected to the visitor economy, which has of course assisted. And of course, there's been some additional interest. So not all bad, but work to realise further potential savings that won't impact on service delivery will of course be essential moving forward. However, you know, I do feel we are resourced to deal with this level of inflationary impact without impacting on delivery of services and corporate objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer Stankley, do you wish to add anything to that?
No, we're looking at a year-end deficit at the moment of just over 600,000. Back in September, the position was recognised that there were inflationary pressures, and decision was made to put into reserves the underspend of 616,000 to be used for a deficit should it occur in 22-23. So we do have that foresight there in terms of having that to draw down upon to offset against the deficit in this year.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's probably a relatively minor point, but if I go to page 35 and 2.6, it says, along with the variances, there's been estimated overspend of 0.198 million, and it anticipates 72,810 redundancy and associated pension costs. So that infers it's, I just want to check, is somebody actually being made redundant? I don't want to go into the realms of staff confidentiality, but I'm just curious as to why we've got redundancy mentioned there, given that, as Councillor Adams has just mentioned, there are obviously a lot of vacancies throughout the staffing area.
These will be in relation to fixed term contracts where anybody within a fixed term contract that has accrued a certain amount of service, a year, 2 years, will be entitled to some redundancy as part of their contract. It's not, we're not making permanent officers redundant at all.
Sorry, it seemed very curious to have the word redundancy written into a report when there are, say, ongoing staff vacancies. So I just want to check we weren't making anyone redundant who was on the full-time page.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Mr. Housley.
Just can we go to page 37, community? There's a variance of 355,000 there, not budgeted for. Can specifically, what is that?
So this is where payment is made in advance for a very number of programmes. So we've had payment in advance from the County Council around the Homes for Ukraine programme and the resource that presents, and also domestic violence and other such projects that sit within that service area.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, if we're all done then, it is recommended the Cabinet note the contents of the report and the current budget monitoring position, and second, recommend to full council that any outturn deficit is funded by using the general fund reserve. And I have a proposer and a seconder for that. Councillor Withington and Councillor Heinrich. Thank you. And a show of hands, please. Thank you. It looks unanimous. Thank you very much. Turning then to item 12, and item 12 is managing performance for Q3. Councillor Adams.
Thank you again. So further good progress across all objectives. I feel some further possibilities of investment by new business, which we're continuing to pursue, and a number of numbers of businesses supported far in excess of expectations, of course, as well. Tree planting plans have, of course, been reached, and further work to realise decarbonisation goals are well underway. Crucially, we have supported many residents dealing with the impacts of cost of living during this quarter and monitoring area. So I continue to see very good reports from residents and other organisations who frequently have contact with those staff in connection with those services, and very warm reports of their work. The High Street Task Force engagement has, of course, started subsequently in Stalham. Work is also underway on the play equipment strategy. But generally, more generally, you can see exemplary planning service performance, very good there, and obviously revenue performance among the very best. But big challenges you are aware of. We have not been able to retain the 3 blue flags, East Runton, Munsley, Sea Pooling, for reasons that are very much out of our control, and we are making the appropriate representations about those issues, and we'll keep you informed, and we'll do everything we can to get those back in 2026. On the benefit change of circumstances, which has obviously been of concern to us, but I will say I'm so pleased with how the staff in that area have risen to the challenge and very much delivered. So we're now seeing delivery on change of circumstances within 8 days. So putting us very much well within the area that we want to be. So look forward to that being reflected in future reports. Given the volume of demand in this area, maintaining the resources for that team will certainly be essential. That's all I wish to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Does any officer wish to add anything to what's been said? No. Questions? Councillor Holliday.
Can I just pick up on the blue flag beaches? Because I had a note from a cabinet member and it was very informational. No criticism of the cabinet member, but there didn't seem any information to portray. And I don't feel this has been pursued as aggressively as it should. So I'm not reassured by the leader's comments there. That's just a brief point on that. I have another question after that. But...
Can you tell me exactly what you were referring to there by a note? I didn't quite get that.
A note is an email. It's something that comes into your email box, a note, with words in it.
No, I just wondered where what bit of information that was, so I could try and elaborate. I wasn't looking
I can
for that.
send it to you afterwards, and if the particular cabinet member, I just got the impression that there wasn't any information to be given, and I'm rather disappointed by that.
Okay, so I'll give you a quick update. We met with Anglian Water and the Environment Agency. We've discovered that there were issues at the Gimmingham combined sewage overflow, but those can't necessarily be directly linked to the issues that we've seen, Sea Pooling, Munsley and East Runton. That said, it's known there's investment needed there without a doubt to prevent that sort of issue reoccurring. It was occurring around the time of the testing. Environment Agency's position, they will be carrying out DNA testing of the water, and if there were any further cases of pollution, that would hopefully give us some idea of the cause. You are aware, unfortunately, we have to prove consistent testing results over some time, so we won't get those blue flags back sadly until 2026. We have also met with Norfolk County Council Highways to look at highway surface drainage. Very unlikely to be the cause of this, of course, because we're talking about very low levels of pollution from road surfaces, leading to a significant test result here. That said, we want to exclude any possibility of that pollution. So we will continue to review things such as beach cleansing. There are no problems, of course, with our beach lifeguards and our existing provision. That's all fine. It's all been about the water testing results. So we've got to try and exclude any possibilities of that reoccurring. We've got to find the cause if we can, and we've got to push for investment in Anglian Water infrastructure within our district, but also arguably around the country. We've seen a deterioration of the water quality elsewhere. That's led to blue flags, frankly, dropping like flies in the north, in the south, in Wales. And that's a considerable issue that needs to be understood, particularly in the context of climate change and impacts on rainfall, heat, etc. So there's work that will need to be done on an ongoing basis by the Environment Agency. I have had a discussion with North Norfolk's MP on this as well. Thank you.
Okay. Does that?
Thank you. That's much more concrete and helpful. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Withington.
Thank you. Page 75, local homes for local need. I'm just wondering because obviously on here it shows that we have increased quite significantly the number of affordable homes being brought forward. But we have a particular issue, I think, in North Norfolk relating to our tourism and holiday lets, etc. In that our high prices mean that the term affordable as a 30% market reduction or shared ownership on that level is actually not affordable for many people in North Norfolk. And I just wondered whether, I don't want to make endless work for officers that might not be relevant, but I wonder whether it would be useful for us as a committee to be aware of how many social housing affordable projects we're bringing forward. For instance, I know there's one come forward in Sheringham of 24 houses that's just been started now. So that we can actually see and how many exception sites, because that's going to be the way, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Fredericks, that's going to be the way that's going to enable us to bring forward the more affordable homes. And I just wonder whether that could be incorporated into this so we can see how we're doing on that, because I think that's the way we're going to impact on this problem. I don't know whether there's an officer that can.
Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you, Councillor Withington. Yes, we can certainly do that. Hopefully, with the nutrient neutrality actions that this council has taken, we should be able to move forward with more affordable and social rented homes. There are some in the pipeline coming forward, and perhaps in the coming months we can give an update on the housing strategy to yourselves, or I can give a written update on how we're performing and what's coming through the pipeline to you, if that's acceptable. I'm very open to answering those questions.
Have we got anything scheduled as part of our routine work?
I don't think so at the current time, but once we start kind of piecing together the work programme for next year, we can look to put something in.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Chairman, for letting me speak. Can I just ask about boosting business sustainability and growth? I think like one or two other members, I seem to have had a lot of calls from local businesses about a massive increase in their business rates without any explanation being given to them. The other point I would make, and I can obviously only really talk about Fakenham, and recently because of this, one of our largest printing companies is stopping work. They have sold up. We've got 3 gift shops and 7 other empty shops. Nobody seems to be moving. They come along, they have a look. When they look at the business rates, it's obviously putting them off for many business. And I just wondered whether we had any other plan or anybody knew of anything that was on the pipeline to be done. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Adams.
So obviously refer you to the business rates item that we had on our last full council agenda. I did speak about this briefly. Obviously, we don't set business rates. It's they're all considered elsewhere. But the team here I do find are very helpful in dealing with those sorts of queries. I've had them myself in relation to a public house. They were offset this year by the business rate discounts. Their concern, of course, was also what happens in future years after any changes to the current discount. So I think one of the first questions you might want to seek to establish is whether they are actually entitled to any business rate reduction that hasn't been immediately apparent. It's not necessarily something we do in-house, but our team are very helpful dealing with these queries. So I'd have a look at it like that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Housden.
Well, yeah, as I understand, businesses at Tatterset and I think at West Raynham have seen their rateable value change. So there's obviously the district value has done a revaluation, and their costs have gone up 18%, which is very significant. I have written to the district valuer in Cambridge because I would like an explanation in this particular climate why that's happening. But it's to do with rateable value, as I understand.
You wish to add anything to that?
No, I'm just saying, yes, it is the rateable value. It's the district value that establishes the rate, the rates for those properties essentially. So for those premises, but there is some advice that you can get from within the district council revenues team, and they're generally very, very helpful, informative on it. So please do pursue that.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that rateable values are outside the gift of this council. We are told to bill according to those which have been determined, and I think directly we're not able to have any influence. Indirectly we may be able to, but of course there's no guarantee that that will deliver what's required in the time that might be required either. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it's not specifically itemized. Water quality, water scarcity. I don't know if anybody's had taken time to look, but if you look at some of the European assessments, this part of Norfolk is critical. The groundwaters have dropped. And I wondered within the planning context if we could start to look at the reservoirs for farmers, because I think this is going to be a problem, a significant problem. And I think something that needs to be addressed countrywide. But, you know, I think we've had a very dry winter again. If we hit another dry period, as we generally do through April and May, it is going to be very serious. And it's not a question of hosepipe dams. It's a question that farmers are really going to be struggling for water supplies because the ground levels are so low.
You raise a very good point, and I can only speak from my own ward area, but I've got examples of two groups of farmers who have been very proactive in installing building reservoirs purposely for those needs. But you might have a more general picture, Mr. Blatch.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Housen raises an issue which is becoming of acute concern in North Norfolk, both in terms of agricultural businesses, abstraction licenses, balancing our unique landscape and ecology, and in terms of future housing and business growth. This is an issue that the authority is working on with the Member of Parliament for North Norfolk around a particular business that has water requirements. The Anglian Water Strategic Investment Plan is looking at the development of new reservoirs to facilitate the move of water from the north of the country or from the Trent and Humber estuaries down into areas of population growth. But that strategy will not deliver till the early 2030s. And we have an acute and increasing pressure now, as you've talked about. So there was a report launched this week that's been reported in national media around low rainfall levels, particularly during February. The aquifers here are already depleted and river levels are falling. So I think there is a need for urgency in this regard. As I say, we're working with the Member of Parliament, seeking a meeting with DEFRA officials, and I've also in the process of drafting a letter to Anglian Water around those issues, but also the issue of water quality, the need for investment in water treatment infrastructure, particularly on the back of the blue flag issue that has already been debated this morning. So I think that there is some critical issues in terms of water availability and infrastructure in this district, which do need priority consideration and are unable to be wait into the future. The issue that Councillor Dixon has raised in terms of his own ward or the east of the district, there the Environment Agency has given notice around the withdrawal of a number of abstraction licenses, such that the need for seasonal rainwater capture storage reservoirs is being looked into. Depending on where they are located, they may be subject to habitat regulation assessment and comment by Natural England and the Environment Agency. And Mr. Rowson is leading on some work for that, for the authority to hopefully provide clarity and guidance in that respect to streamline that process, but that isn't easy.
Just if I can just come back on that. So in the context of reservoirs for farmers, and I understand the statutory undertakes that we have to consult, are we free to push those through, given that they fulfil the requirements in our own right, or are we still seeking further government advice from DEFRA?
I don't know whether we're seeking government advice from DEFRA. It sits within the planning regime. Dependent on their size, they aren't permitted development, so they do require to go through that statutory notification process and comment by statutory consultees who may have competing interests in commenting on such developments. It's not just around their existence in landscape terms, impact on neighbours, management of any breaches, or if the wall was to break or whatever, so contributing to surface water flooding. But there is implications in terms of their relationship with groundwater and their implications for areas of special scientific interest. So we have very many competing interests to consider with such proposals because of our designated status both along the coast and in respect of the Broads.
Fine. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, again, in my own ward area, I know that one particular reservoir application took a long time to progress to a decision, and I know the reasons why that was, but I am heartened to see that another second reservoir application looks to be going through in a much quicker order of time. A decision not yet been made on that, but we seem to be moving at a faster pace, and I think that's perhaps because we've more familiar with what the requirements are, and to some extent the applicants become more familiar with what's required. So when they submit their application, the various assessments that need to be part of that package are there at the same time. So
thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful for that comment, because I think officers will appreciate that understanding. So thank you very much.
That's my reading of the situation. But more generally, I think that Norfolk, and we are very much a part of that critical area. The water cycle is under considerable pressure, and that's that bigger thing. So what happens to all the water, and what happens to, in terms of demands, whether they be residential, agricultural, industrial, and to preserve the ecology at the appropriate water levels required, is a really tricky process. And I'm aware from 10 years ago, at least, concerns being expressed with regard to those areas which are much more critical. And I guess the conservation sites, the SSSI and so on and so forth sites, have really come to the fore, and we are now much more aware of what's going on. And to be absolutely honest with you, I do question whether the aspiration of development that's been expressed across the county, whether it actually is deliverable with the current infrastructure, and even with infrastructure upgrades, I'm still not confident that that is going to be delivered and preserve water quality and meet nutrient neutrality requirements. And just to emphasize that nutrient neutrality, of course, is only to stop it from getting worse than it already is. So we're not addressing what I would call the pollution deficit that we're already in. So for me, I would expect not only once we got on top of nutrient neutrality, there will be steps, I believe, that will say, okay, and now we need to address the pollution deficit, and that will be more painful, and that will bring more pressure for Councillor Fredericks and her requirements on affordable housing and so on and so forth. You wish to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real difficult balancing act, because we need to house people and we need to build new affordable housing. It is a quandary, and I think that allowing water companies to pollute our rivers is only going to make the situation worse. We're clearing it up, but if we're going to get a load more through from overspill of water companies, then I think we're just going to be, oh, I can't even say it, but up the creek without a paddle. Thank you.
Councillor Hardrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's just following up on that. I mean, just with reference to North Walsham, there are considerable concerns over the 1,800 plus homes as to whether the water supply will be adequate. We're looking at boreholes to 2 towers built sometime in the 30s, and then again, the second one, I think it was in the early 50s. For a town of 5,500 maximum, we're going to be nearly 18,000 at some point. And there are real concerns. The water supply can't cope with that massive investment, let alone the sewage works, which is possibly one of the contributors to the loss of the blue flag at Munsley. All we get from Anglian Water is just bland platitudes. Yes, it's fine. Go ahead. It's fairly obvious on the ground that it's not necessarily as fine as we're told, and we're just not getting any facts from them or any forward planning as to how they intend to provide additional infrastructure. And we really do need that. Thank you.
Therein lies some huge challenges. Okay, thank you. Any other? Councillor Holliday.
Can I just say, I really like the way the comparisons have been put into the performance report, and I'd like to thank the officers involved to what must have been an absolutely ginormous piece of work, but I think it's very valuable because, as you know, sometimes I have concerns about marking our own homework, and I think this is really very useful. Thank you.
Indeed. Okay, thank you. Any other questions in relation to the managing performance? Okay, in terms of recommendations, we recommend that Cabinet resolve to note this report and endorse the actions being taken by the corporate leadership team detailed in Appendix A. The Cabinet asks for further information or action where they consider it necessary regarding performance as outlined in Appendix A. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for those, please? Councillor Toy and Councillor Fisher. Show of hands then, please, to do that. Thank you. Moving on to item 13, which is the performance benchmarking and contextual measures. Who wants to lead on that?
I'm happy to.
I think it might be falling to you.
That's fine. Okay, so obviously, in terms of you fulfilling your statutory undertakings and holding the authority to account for performance, we've talked in the past around the item that you've just discussed and the extent to which the council reporting against the objectives of its corporate plan and what it says it would do, the extent to which that is objective or marking, to use Councillor Holliday's term, our own homework. But that was information that was around the aspirations and objectives of the corporate plan and our measurement of our success or achievement towards those objectives in an ordinary state without a global pandemic. And so we've had to during the 4-year term of this administration, since 2019, there have been a lot of issues that have been unprecedented and have required us to be nimble and dynamic and flexible in terms of delivery. So that isn't to make any excuses for what we either have or haven't done. It's just to set some context around the previous report. But the conversation that you've had is that that doesn't allow comparison with other local authorities, either locally in Norfolk or elsewhere in the country. So your policy and performance officer, Helen Thomas, and Lucy Wilshaw, data analyst, has done some work with you, I think, Councillor Holliday, and the leader of the council to identify some issues which would give better context and understanding of our performance relative to other similar authorities. And initially, we identified through this committee, there were going to be 7 or 8 key indicators that we would look at. And I think that was around business rate collection, housing, affordable housing delivery, recycling rates and planning performance. And then I think there was that conversation has developed further for there to be a deeper understanding, particularly around context, because obviously some of what we do is in response to our health and demographics, our aging population, the nature of our economy, because no 2 local authority areas are the same. And so this report is a development of that conversation. I accept that it's quite heavy and detailed in terms of printed material, but most of this information is accessible to all members and members can be assisted in their scrutiny and digging into this information with the help of Lucy, who's here today, or Helen Thomas. So I would commend the work that's been done here to you. I thank Lucy for that, but it is an issue for information, discussion, and questioning around our performance against that context that we find ourselves in. And I hope that's helpful by way of introduction.
Thank you for that. Questions? Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I go to page 107? And I think it's repeated throughout on subsequent pages. It says the percentage of household recycled has deteriorated somewhat. Do we know how far it's deteriorated, and do we know what the reasons for that may be, and what actions are being taken to reverse that trend? Thank you.
I think that's in the last report, Chair. Page, I think the agenda we're at now is 111 forwards. There are indicators around recycling rates within that report, and I think we have explained some of the challenges previously in that regard, because Norfolk and Suffolk don't do very well in terms of recycling rates. I don't know whether Mr. Hems is able to comment.
I think, clearly from our point of view, we want to collect as much recycling material as possible. We want to improve that rate as a council within the Norfolk setting. Our level of recycling is relatively good. We certainly don't have the level of contamination in recycling, or we have a lower level of contamination in recycling than some of our other Norfolk neighbours, but it is an area that is challenging, because we promote the behaviour and the activity to residents, but there is, and obviously as Norfolk authorities, we have a materials recycling facility. That means that there is a commingled, it's a simple recycling system. Everybody puts their recycling out in a single bin, and it's sorted at the materials recycling facility, so it's a relatively easy system. But we have to try and promote, and encourage as much as we can people to recycle in the right way and of the right materials, in order to drive that up. Clearly, the issue around other authorities in Norfolk, that some of whom have higher rates than we do, is partly linked to their collection of food waste. Actually, in terms of our net zero, I think it's important we promote removal of, or the lack of wasting of food amongst our residents, rather than its collection, because collection is quite carbon intensive. And so it's a bit of a, that from that perspective, whereas we might improve our position in relation to our recycling rates, the potential exists that in doing so we may actually have a negative impact on our net zero journey. And so clearly we want to promote behaviour that improves recycling rate and recycling activity. Is that
Mr. Black?
Thanks, Steve. So I think, but I would also say that this data allows you to ask questions and have a deeper understanding. So because as I say, no two areas are the same. So in terms of the messages around food waste, that would cost a lot of more money, which at the moment isn't in your budget. There's obviously the impact that Steve has talked about in terms of the carbon to collect any food waste. It might be that the authority thinks it's better to deliver a message to its residents that they shouldn't overbuy, because that would have impact around financial inclusion and budgets. Lots of people go to the supermarket once a week, fill their fridge, and then don't use everything that is in their fridge. And then there's a need to dispose. And at the moment, because we don't have a food waste collection service, it goes into the residual bin and there is weight in that. Also, in terms of brown bin garden waste collection, obviously we are a highly rural area, so some people won't choose to use that service because they'll be able to compost at home, and so no two areas are the same. So I think this information allows you to ask questions and to gain understanding, but it isn't always that we would ever be the best. We can aspire to be the best, but there is context around some of that. And there are choices around food waste. It is something that I think the new administration will need to consider, but there is a direct financial cost and carbon cost in terms of that, where the disposal facilities are in Norfolk. All of those issues would need to be factored into any decision that is taken. But on this data, our performance, and I think previously there was a Norfolk or East of England performance, the performance of Norfolk and Suffolk around waste and recycling was not strong in comparison to many other parts of the country.
Thank you for that. And I think you raise a very, very interesting point that we tend to quite easily gloss over and overlook the work that can be done in terms of stopping the creation. And so it's about learning techniques and practices that are more efficient in the use of our resources, whether it be food or whether it be other materials. And if we can stop the creation of it, if we can reduce the creation of it, and if we can have more efficient ways of actually dealing with it, that which you cannot avoid, then that's fine. But I think there is a tendency to kind of look at what we see as solutions elsewhere and thinking that they are fit for purpose for everywhere. And that's not always the case at all. But it is right, I think, that we should have those discussions, because without those discussions, we won't have that wider understanding. So I thank you for that. I've got Councillor Adams, Councillor Toy and Councillor Fredericks.
Yeah, I did want to point out what Steve had pointed out, that actually the performances of our geographical neighbours on recycling isn't much different, if not worse. If you look at King's Lynn, which is the SIP for nearest neighbour, but I'm aware Yarmouth, for instance, it's a position that's a lot more challenging. So it's not something Norfolk, I'm sad to say, is good at as a whole. Compared to many other county areas. We, on food waste specifically, as it was raised, we are of course also waiting for some clarity on potential government funding, and there's been a lot of different noises, I suppose you could say, on that. We are of course at a disadvantage in being a large rural area to fund such a service and try and deal with the carbon impact of that. But also, just to point out, we have had the small electrical and battery collection services slowly being rolled out. Maybe this week's not a good example of that, but it's the case that we are trying to increase the levels of recycling. There's another reason, of course, with the batteries, because the lithium batteries do cause the fires in the waste freighters. So that said, we are doing some things, and I think there's a lot more to do on that communications front as well. I'd really like to get our team over there to the MERV and actually start promoting the financial benefits to residents being better with their recycling, the value of the recycler, and avoiding contamination. There's every reason to want to do that as a ratepayer, isn't there? So we certainly have more to do and we could do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you basically said what I was going to get to, and that is, it's right that we have routes to waste disposal, whether that's recycled or whatever, but actually it should all be going down. We shouldn't be creating waste of all sorts. That would be my opinion, and hence we need to have that conversation. And so, yeah, so thank you. You've already said it, but I just thought I'd confirm that. Thank you.
Okay, good. Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to talk about supermarket food waste as well. We've noticed at the food larder that supermarkets are actually cutting down on their waste. So that's a really positive move for Norfolk. Obviously, it's not a positive move for the people that need it, but we're putting other steps in place. So I would remind people that if they have anything that's in their cupboards that isn't being used, that the food larders would really love that. I'd love to take that on and distribute those to people in need, and also to growers as well. We're busy planting seeds, and we're hoping for bumper crops. So if there are any fresh fruit and vegetables, they're always accepted at food larders across the district as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Housen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, because I've only got these at the beginning of the meeting. Can we go to page 176 and 179? I just need an explanation of the total expenditure, central services per head of population. We seem to be in advance of the mean in every year of that, and the data set appears to be missing on page 176. I wonder if just a general explanation on that information, really.
Who would like to lead on that?
So the data isn't available for the 2021-22 financial year because we haven't received our final external audit yet.
Right.
And we are making comparisons. It's one of the issues I've asked the new Section 151 Officer Director of Resources, Tina Stangley, to do for us, is to understand that central services per head of population cost better in terms of what makes that up, because it is not a comfortable space in terms of us being ahead of the average for that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rest, and then Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chairman. On a similar vein, if I could ask for page 197, just curious to know why the items SIP for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 have nothing provided. That's page 197, 198. It's got the titles, but there is no information being provided. I just wondered, is it sensitive or does it not affect us?
These are the two at the bottom.
Next page.
Yep. Right. Yep.
I don't have an answer to that, sorry.
I'd suggest maybe that the returns haven't been completed, probably due to capacity issues in the sections.
I'll have to take that away and come back to you, because the data is obviously, and the commentary is included in the previous pages. It's not carried forward in some of those boxes. So I think I'll need to take that away. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I've just checked. So those are management responses. The data has been provided. That's where managers have been asked if they wish to provide any comments, and they haven't done so. So it's not that the data hasn't been provided into the system. It's in terms of the benchmarking. It's that in terms of that commentary, no commentary has been provided.
So, sorry, on that context, then the number of affordable homes delivered, there's no context. Is that what you're saying, that they don't want to tell us, or they don't know?
No, I think the data around the number of affordable homes has been provided, but there hasn't been a management commentary provided beyond the data.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll take that away, because I think the data is in the preceding elements. There's a lot, and I think Councillor Holiday was generous enough earlier on in the corporate plan report to say that the benchmarking or comparison data had then been included. So I don't know why it's not in this table. So I will need to take that away. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Holiday. Is your microphone on?
Sorry, I'm a bit croaky. I think this is an excellent report, and thanks again for the work that's gone into it. And I think it's very useful. And actually some people have tried to take deep dives into issues such as the business birth rate and things like that, which is actually very helpful. So I think it does stimulate some quite good probing. It's just a question I think that hasn't been pulled through to that last table, but there is quite a lot of discussion here about things. And I think it's very, it does take a lot of paper. Perhaps we should get it electronically, except you can't get it electronically either, apparently. But I do think it's great. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, I echo that actually. I think we've taken significant steps in the right direction to put into context our performance, and we kind of shifted our gaze from, if you like, just our own to where we fit in that bigger picture. So, and I know you've been particularly keen that we do that, and I'm pleased with the results that we're moving in, I think, the right direction. And I think we've all learnt a bit more about where we sit in performance terms. And I think benchmarking is something that we need to do a bit more of. And I think there may be a way in which we might be able to condense some of this information into more, perhaps we might be able to have it in a digital form rather than a paper form, and manage it that way, because certainly the volume of it is quite considerable. And we might even need to perhaps change our focus. In other words, concentrate on more, on the outliers, and not perhaps on too broad a brush. But that's something for the future.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me.
Yes.
There's 160 odd pages. Not that I criticise that, which would be quite difficult to read on an iPad. And I'm not wanting to put more pressure on officers, but this is the sort of information that would be nice to have at least a week before an overview and scrutiny meeting, so we can absorb it. It's not a case of reading it. You need to absorb it before you can really get into the bones of it. And I just wondered if there's any possibility that it could be circulated to the ONS ahead of the sort of main package of papers. I mean, I like to read things and let them settle in my head, and then I can come back to them and it's more relevant.
I'm just looking to Lucy. I think that information is there and she'll probably tell you how to access that.
We've just set up a site on the internet in the CDU's area called Intelligence Centre. So because the reports are all automated, so they'll be updated as the new data comes in. They're actually on that area. And I think the link is actually in the paperwork that you've been given. But I can work with Emma to make that be sent out in the members' bulletins. Everybody's got that as well.
I just think it would be helpful. It's just, I mean, there's a lot of information that is very good information. I'm not criticising. It's just, it takes a while to absorb it all. I prefer to see it in a paper format, although I know it's not the best one, and the screens on the iPads aren't particularly large. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I think that's a very useful way forward, although I have to say I doubt that there's that many of us that will spend our leisure hours trawling through our website, looking for stimulating information of this kind. We generally need a prompt for that, but it is one way of overcoming that particular problem, and we do need to tackle this, because the volume of paper, in my view, is not sustainable for the future. So I think that if we can do something along those lines, that might be very beneficial.
Just to note, Chairman, one of the recommendations included for the contextual measures report is to consider whether printed copies of the additional attachments for monitoring the health profile should be retained, or if hyperlinks would suffice. I think if we did go down the hyperlink route, that would significantly reduce the amount of pages that need to be printed, essentially.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah, okay, thank you. I saw another hand. Yes, Councillor Withington.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate as well what Councillor Holliday say about how useful this is, but I think there's another use beyond council as well. I mean, I'm looking at this with other hats on, and I'm immediately thinking that's brilliant information for me. I can use this in certain funding applications and developing strategies for groups that are working across the community. So I think we're not just only focusing on benchmarking, providing this information is going to be really useful for a number of sectors across our communities. So I really appreciate it in that respect. Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. Any Councillor Adams?
Yes, I just wondered what if the committee could have a discussion about that birth of business rates per 10,000 population. I mean, it's sort of been described essentially that it's not a particularly coherent measure because a significant proportion of our population isn't economically active. I did say quite a number of months ago, you know, I thought it might be best to look at the survival rate of existing businesses, and that's seen as a proportionate measure. So I just wondered whether you wanted to have a look at that in greater detail, because I think it would be a good idea to do so. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Blatch.
I think that it would be an area that it would be useful for the council post the elections in May to consider. There was some ONS data released this week, which obviously a number of you might have seen. It's been reported in national media, but the ONS survey, the census for 2021, although it was has some caveats around it because of this furlough situation and in that first wave of COVID and lockdown, many people in tourism weren't employed, they were on furlough. But the headline this week was that we had the second lowest level of economic activity in the country behind East Lindsey in Lincolnshire. But the measure is for people aged 16 and over. And as we have the highest pensioner population or aged population over the age of 65, that seems to be a somewhat poor metric to measure us against. Whereas if you look at our economically active between 16 and 65, we are at around 78 or 80%. So we are probably mid-table nationally rather than at the either bottom or top, depending on how you measure that other indicator. But if you've got a pool of people that then are not, in terms of your head of population, that are outside of the working age because of retirement, the number of people that they are then going to be drawing upon in terms of business startups and formation is going to be, it's a much smaller pool that you can measure against. So I think all of those issues, as well as the ones around premises supply, access to cash, housing costs and all the rest of it, life age in terms of when people are minded to become entrepreneurs, etc., are all things that should inform the strategy that we have moving forward in terms of supporting business startup and growth. So, you know, I think that the journey that we've been on in terms of presenting this information to you has been positive. I think there is perhaps not universal, but strong support across the chamber that this information is helpful. In the CDU, we're able to make that available to new members in digital formats, independent access, rather than just in reports that are static and presented at a moment in time. And we can have that conversation as the new corporate plan is developed in terms of what measurable outcomes we have and what projects we'd like to deliver and what outcomes they will deliver in numerical terms against this data. So that's how I think we see this piece of work moving forward into the future beyond the election.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think that would be good if it were to be able to be progressed in that way and inform much of what we will be deciding in strategy terms for the future. Good. Any other comments? Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify. Was it Lucy? Sorry, is it Lucy? Yes, thank you. So this is available online now and it is automatically updated. Therefore, we've got a work programme. We know when it's due. We get the hyperlink. We can go to it any time.
Yeah, the hyperlink is in the paperwork already, but I'll work with Emma to get that out to you again. So so it's all, the idea of doing not an LG inform is the data is all updated as the data comes in from central government.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's always there, Mr. Chairman. We don't need, that advance notice. It's there for us all the time. We've got what are we doing quarterly? So we've got 3 months notice already that we need to be looking at it.
The answer to your dream.
You can spend your leisure time exploring. Well, not mine, but anybody who wishes to get into that detail, it is there permanently. So thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. That's great.
Okay, are we all done then? Okay, if we are, then there's a number of recommendations there, which I won't go through them individually, but there's for the benchmarking report, there's 3 on page 111, and there's a further 5 in relation to for the contextual measures report. And I think we're looking at number 5 or 3, 4, and 5. You'd like a decision from us today?
Yeah, I think we just need to know from the committee, as Tim raised there, the whether additional data is, if it is available on that birth of new enterprises per 10,000 residents, whether that the ages can be provided from up to the pension age rather than above it. And then specifically, I think on number 5, if the committee is happy to go with providing that data via hyperlink rather than in the report, would be helpful to have a kind of confirmation on.
Okay, well, let's deal with them in turn then. So at the bottom of page 111, we've got item 3 there, which to decide if the additional data sets are needed to monitor business demography in relation to the data set set for 9 rate of births of new enterprises within a. What's the proposal on that?
Well, I would propose that we move it so that it makes sense for us. So to retirement age, because we know how much that number is impacted by our resident average age. So I think it makes more sense. Otherwise, we're looking at something that doesn't make, we're not getting any value from.
Yeah.
Lucy, can I just confirm, is that a possibility?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think it is actually available. Yeah, I'll have to just double check, but yes, I think it is.
I mean, there is an incredibly powerful on page 234 of the health report. If you look at population and life expectancy, you can see just how skewed the North Norfolk demography is compared to the national average, and that is then going to impact upon business starts and that sort of thing, because it's about who's in their life at that life stage who want to be able to do that. And most people in North Norfolk are 60 plus, who probably are looking to their retirement and enjoying themselves, not running a business and all that goes with that in terms of angst and risk.
Okay, Councillor Holiday, did you wish to speak?
Just going back to the birth of businesses, it does say in the commentary on page 113 that because it's compared to SIP for nearest neighbours, they are actually taking the demographics into account. So I don't think we should brush it under the carpet as saying it doesn't apply to us because we've got an elderly population.
No, not at all. And I think we should be using it. So if you look at the relative performance of the authorities in our SIPFA group, particularly in Devon and Somerset, they do have similar demographics to us, but we're not doing as well. So do they have do their local enterprise partnership, for example, do they have a different model of business startup, business advice that is rural in its focus? That's something that has concerned this authority for a long period of time. And that's something that we should look to learn from elsewhere.
Okay, so is it the, as Councillor Buttercover has suggested, that new data set would exclude the 65s and over effectively? Yeah, the over 65, that's right. You comfortable with that? Yeah. No dissenters on that. Okay, moving then to over the page, the frequency of further reviews of the report. What sort of frequency would you like to see that?
Sorry, Chairman, quarterly, do you think?
I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
No advance on quarterlies? Quarterlies it is then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Decide on any additional reports needed for different comparison groups such as the Norfolk districts or the East of England districts. You wish for any changes? No. Okay, then that remains the same. Decide if the printed copies of the additional attachments for monitoring the health profile should be retained for meetings or if a hyperlink will suffice. I think we've gone for the hyperlink, haven't we? Okay, right. So if we can just take those en bloc, then can I have a proposer and a seconder for those as they stand and those that have been decided upon? Have a proposer, please. Councillor Buttercover and Councillor Toy. A show of hands then, please. That looks unanimous to me. Thank you. Right. Okay. So moving on then to our next item, which is the item 14, ambulance response times monitoring.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, should we not have a short break?
Well, there's a choice here. We are tantalizingly close to, this is the last item of substantive business. So if you want to have a break, we can have a break. I've been going for 2 hours, or we can continue to complete the business. Who wants to have a break? Show of hands.
I just me, but clearly I'm the only one. I just think it's the next item is quite a substantive item. It's not something we can rush through. And I just thought getting a drink would have been a good idea, but clearly I'm outvoted, so that's fine.
It's as detailed as you want to make it. I take it, I take your point that it is substantive in the implications, but I don't know how long it will take us.
Okay, well, if I keel over, please just pour some hydration into me. Yeah, call an ambulance if I keel over.
Okay, so if we continue then for item 14, and I think there is a
just to note, Emma has got there. I circulated via email updated data sets which differentiate between the postcodes, for which we requested the original report or the original data within the agenda. Just has aggregated data which kind of covers some of the problems. So this, for anyone that didn't see the email, this is differentiated data. I note that we did request commentary on this data from E-East. They weren't particularly forthcoming on that. I know, Victoria, you chased that up, and I don't know if you had a chance to kind of get any more context from them. The one comment that did come through, and it's not something that we haven't heard before, is that hospital turnaround times continue to be a problem, but Victoria may like to kind of add to that. So I will, if you have anything to add, Victoria, I'll just pass over to you.
Okay, thank you. I had a brief note from the Ambulance Trust, and I don't know if you've got any questions about the data. In which case, ask not the data itself, but the actual classifications, and ask me. But they said they were doing lots and lots of work to reduce the demand on the hospital, which is true actually. And when talking to them, they have got lots and lots of diversion. Very good diversion procedures in place. And a lot of the problem is the ambulance response times at the NNN, which I do actually have separately from the ambulance service. And I must say they are staggeringly higher than any of the East of England hospitals. I mean, like 3 times as bad. This is the number of hours that the ambulances stay outside the hospital. So the QE is also quite generous in its numbers, but not quite as bad as the NNN. So that's a real problem for us, but not within the Ambulance Trust's control. But they are, if you look at the number actually taken to hospital, they're actually quite low. That's because they do a lot of hear and treat, where they triage people on the phone. They do see and treat, where they see people in their homes and don't send them on, or they send them to a local provider. And they have various mental health cars and lots of other very good initiatives, actually. And they're actually transporting, 50%, 60% of patients, so the demand is actually down. The number of calls is down from the last FOI numbers that I had from the end of the last year. So the number of calls are down and they're not transferring as many. So the problem to me is the bottleneck at the hospital. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So comments, questions? Councillor Buttercup.
I suppose my first question is why we haven't got, maybe I'm missing it, but we haven't got any information here for NR11.
No, that's because it started off as the North Norfolk Coastal Ambulance Response Initiative, and we focused on it started with Wells, which is NR23, which has always been the worst.
Yeah.
And then we looked at numbers from nearby postcodes. And we did it once for the whole patch. The numbers were so confusing, and it's such a lot of work for the FOI guys, because I get my numbers from FOI, that we didn't repeat the process. But if you wanted to get the numbers for your patch, then it's very easily done through the ambulance trust. But this was looking at the area where the numbers were at the beginning were the worst.
Okay, I mean, I seem to remember attending a meeting in Clyde quite early on in all of this. And I thought at that time that we were going to be looking at the whole district. Because I think that's really important. I mean, I have a very personal interest in this. I want to know that if I call an ambulance for a certain person, they can turn up. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm sure we all want to know that.
Well, it's perfectly possible. I mean, I couldn't cope with the amount of data coming through, quite frankly. But if it was done more centrally,
Yeah,
we find it's quite a lot of work, but it's absolutely worth doing.
Yeah,
But it
we
would have
can
to come through this
absolutely.
organisation, this group. It would be the North Norfolk Coastal Group has been my baby, and I've managed it because it's a fairly small number of parish postcodes. But to explode it greater, which I think is a very valuable thing to do, would need to be done more centrally.
Yes, it's my understanding that we started off with that fairly focused on those postcodes where it was significantly worse than others. Is that correct?
It was indeed, and there was one set of numbers which was Pan district. And then because this happens to fall on my shoulders, I don't have the capacity to deal with Pan district requests and Pan district data processing. Not that I'm any good at data processing. So that's where it went back to the area that I'm leading on, which is my patch. So if anybody wants, I think it would be great if it was Pan district, but it has to come in, the information has to come into this organization in a different route. And either it comes through East, who are obviously very stretched. But I think it should be, I totally agree it should be done. It'll have to be a different format.
I think in terms of the issues that are of concern district wide, if this is important to you as a committee, and East aren't able to provide you with the information at a district level and you think that is important, we need as an officer team to be able to present that as a district level rather than that resting with an individual member, because I perceive there's some discomfort from other members that we're talking about one geographic area of the district without understanding the impact or response times elsewhere. I understand that the coastal strip was up where this was identified as an acute issue originally. But I think with COVID, with the position of the ambulance service more generally, I think there is wider context and concern, and I think we should look at doing this on a district-wide basis if that's what the committee wishes, and we should resource that internally through the resource that Lucy Wilshaw presents to us in terms of being a data analyst, because it shouldn't rest with an individual member. You aren't getting a complete picture with the information that's presented here today.
Mr. Buttercover.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I know that Councillor Holiday has led on this, from very, very early on. And I think you're right. It can't fall on one individual. It's a lot of work. And I think all of us across the district care passionately about making sure our residents get the service that they trust they're going to get and need. So I think it's particularly with our demographic, I think it's really important that we know for the whole district. Please.
I think we've over the years, and it's now been running for years, we've had discussions around to the extent to which we should rely upon HOSC and our representative on HOSC in terms of taking forward the district wide, as well as those areas where there is greatest concern over poor performance. And I guess we have to look at that bigger picture. We are talking about our ability to influence another agency, and there's always going to be some difficulty in about how we best exercise that influence and how we best use our resources in terms of reaching particular decisions or particular aspirations that we would like to be given priority. And I think that we do have to face that, and we have to make a decision as a committee about how we want to commit those resources. That doesn't take anything away from your view and our view that we would want our residents to receive the best service, but that applies across a whole raft of agencies. You know, we talk a lot about Anglian water and pollution and water supply and so on and so forth. That again is another external agency over which we have to, you know, exercise the best influence we can. I think we've got to be realistic about what we want to do, but it's up to us. We can decide. Up to now, the decision has been to focus on these rather than across the whole district. Now, that will always bring about, I think, concerns for those, including myself, who are not included in this. And if we think that there is a merit, if there's merit in doing so, then it's up to us to raise it. But I think we ought to be mindful about the volume of data that is going to present us with and how we're going to use that, and as well as the resources in terms of preparing that. That shouldn't rest with a member of this committee, a councillor. It should rest within the officer element of the council. So I think they are things that come out of this, I think, fairly obviously. So I think we can make progress on that basis, but I do think we have to be mindful about the limitations that are that we have to work within.
I agree to a certain extent, Mr. Chairman, but at the end of the day, all our residents deserve the best we can give them, where regardless of wherever they are in the district. And even if we can only look at that high volume of data, maybe a couple of times a year, and then pick out those at that time that are the worst performing at that point, something like that. I don't know. I'm just thinking there must be different ways and means, but I do appreciate what you're saying. It is a huge amount of work. We just need to find a way to get something out of the system.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And that's for us to decide. As I said, up to now, the focus has been fairly narrow on those areas where the greatest, if you like, the greatest performance disparity rests. And that probably is not an unreasonable approach when we consider the district wide. That doesn't, of course, mitigate those areas where the performance is still poor, but not as poor as others. So, Councillor Holliday. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. Well, you alluded to parish councils earlier on. And of course, every time this hits the press, and there happens to be a parish council meeting, the parish councils are asking, you know, are you having any input on ambulance response times? Are you involved? And they do ask questions as to whether, I mean, some of them know I sit on overview and scrutiny, whether we have the opportunity to question. So I do think it has to be district wide. I do accept there's a lot of data, but I think it's important, even if we can feed it back to the parish councils as and when we have those opportunities.
Okay. Mr. Black.
I think you have to look at this district wide, because otherwise you don't know whether the interventions that have been made in good faith by the East of England Ambulance Service in one part of the district has had a negative impact somewhere else. And I'm not saying that it has, that isn't my position, but I don't know how you can make informed decisions as a committee of this authority around one space without understanding the context of another. It might be that there's nothing to see somewhere else. It might be that it's at a regional average, but you don't know, do you? And I think that's the concern that I would have around focusing attention on one space where the data appears to suggest that positive improvements are being made, and Councillor Holliday's acknowledged that, but you don't know that in the context of the wider district.
I think the thing is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this started because Wells Wells had been identified in the press as one of the worst localities in North Norfolk, and that's, yeah. Okay, yes, I agree. Yeah.
So I think it's really where we kind of started from and where we want to go to, and it's up to us to decide where we want to go to. It's I'm heartened to hear Mr. Blatch supporting the idea of taking that wider view, even though that does have resource implications. But I think it would certainly qualify some of the
I wouldn't say decisions that we've taken, because I'm not sure that we have taken any decisions other than to put pressure on East. But it certainly would form a much rounder picture of what the situation is. So I think if we get nothing out of this other than that, then that would be helpful. Any other points? That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I could have produced it district-wide, but I wasn't asked to produce that, so I do apologise for upsetting everybody. But it's been very useful to do it on a local basis. And I think it does have a value with regards to NHOSC, because it's only by looking at the postcodes that you see where the disparities are. And it's, they look at the fact we've actually got Norfolk and Waveney data is pretty good, because you try and find that on the web, you won't. So the fact that we even get North and Wave, I mean, it's more granular data, and more you'll learn from it, and not NHOSC won't have the time for that. So I think it does really have a value in this organisation.
Thank you. Well, in my view, you have nothing to apologise for, I have to say, because we wouldn't be sitting here today, considering what we have here today, without your good efforts. Yes, we have visited the wider picture and had a look at that on one occasion, but I think we probably do need to have that wider picture, and we need to have a way of grasping that, maybe not in a wealth of data, but there may be a way of presenting that in a simplified way that enables us to see where the problem areas are. Because I don't think have the the time and capacity to go into huge, great depth about it, but I do think we need to plumb it to such an extent where we know where the worst of the problems are, and be sure, as Mr. Black rightly says, that even if we've been successful in solving, improving performance in one area, has that been to the detriment of others? I have no idea. So I think, without getting too involved in the detail here, they are the kind of decisions perhaps that we might be able to reach today. Anything else? Emma.
Following up from Victoria's comments, because I dealt with the contact at the East Anglian Trust, and they came back with some further detail and said that they can essentially provide the detail that we want, but they have a 6-week lead-in request. So if we just make sure that we submit that in good time, they're happy to work with the level of detail that we want, and Matt and I can arrange that for members, so we can ensure that's ready for next time.
Okay, that's reassuring. You just need to bear in mind that whatever we see will be 6 weeks out of date.
I think that's very useful. Thank you, Emma. And I think I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Housden said. Certainly there was no criticism meant of Councillor Holliday. Without her picking it up in the first instance, we wouldn't be where we are now. So, thank you for the work that's been done.
Thank you for that. Okay. Does anybody else have any further comments on this? So, can I have a proposer that we look at this in the future across as a district-wide piece of work? I think there will need to be some discussions around how that gets presented to us and when that comes to us. But I think for the time being, I'm just conscious that we're coming to the end of an administration, and if we can pick this matter up in the new administration, because we're sitting around making decisions with regard to what we believe, others may be sitting here in a few months' time making different decisions. But I think in principle, we would make a provisional decision that we do further work on this on a district-wide basis, and that a further report be brought back to this committee on that basis. So that, I think, is probably as a simpler proposal that I can kind of frame. Would anybody like to propose that and second that? I've got Councillor Housden and Councillor Buttercofer. A show of hands then, please.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, okay. Item 15 is the Cabinet Work Programme.
Yeah, unless there's been any changes, I think the case for both the work programs is, as has just been said, we are coming to the end of the term of the administration. I don't think there's any more scheduled meetings. I'll just look to Emma, I don't know. So the work programs have essentially come to the end of the term. And new ones will be prepared as we get closer and then agreed post-election.
Okay, thank you. And the committee work programme?
Yeah, same applies for that. We've essentially reached the end of the year's work programme. There's certainly things that I'll look to bring forward earlier, such as, you know, today with the PCC not able to attend, perhaps we can look to get that in soon after the election to kind of save us having to wait an entire other year to hear from the PCC.
Okay, questions on both of those work programmes? No. Thank you. So that concludes items 15 and 16. And we've got no reasons to exclude the public. So that concludes the business of the meeting. So thank you very much. I formally close the meeting.